as a manager, you can be seen as the boss, the authority, but actually just having that moment where you're on the same level as everybody else means that you have more openness with your employees, and they have a kind of more willingness to come to you when they actually have a problem.
No matter how many emails, Zooms, or Teams meetings, or even virtual happy hours, it is impossible to replace the impact of in-person communication. Even though remote and hybrid work options have allowed businesses to stay productive through the pandemic, one of the biggest challenges has been effective communication. Sometimes, digital communications are often more open to interpretation and more likely to cause confusion, which is in turn more likely to negatively affect everything from productivity to morale. Welcome back to Yo's Back to Work podcast. I'm Joe McIntyre. On this podcast, we explore the effective ways of keeping top talent engaged in team settings, whether they are remote, hybrid, or in person. Today, I'm excited to welcome Ben Kendrew, Recruitment Manager and Technical Staffing Specialist for Yo in its UK and Europe office. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, hi Joe, thanks for having me.
Well, Ben, it's great to have you. So let's jump right in. Since the beginning of the pandemic, workplaces have essentially never been more remote or hybrid. Yet resilient organizations have found new ways to embrace flexible teams and working environments that work for every different person. How has this impacted the way employers and employees interact with each other in the workplace? Have you seen any big changes or big challenges with the way people interact from remote to in person?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been testing for everyone, for employees and employers. I think the number of behaviors and trends have been observed within my own team as well as within our customers. Managers and companies are now more aware of the level of engagement that they have with employees when they're working remotely. So I think that, from a personal perspective, more conscious to ensure that we spend time with everyone as individuals, as well as in enabling like group interactions. So this has been a positive impact on, when previously we might have actually taken for granted time in the office as time that we're engaging and communicating with employees. But, in my opinion, managers now have to work harder to provide a structure to the working day that might previously have not have been there, when they were 100% working in the office, because it's very easy to get into a routine, into becoming complacent with, really taking some of your best people for granted that they're always going to be there. So I think that, one of the changes I think, the companies have had to adapt to is really being proactive with their engagement strategy. And I think this also has helped, understand productivity as well. I think that companies are also tracking productivity because there's that bit of paranoia around what are our staff doing, when they're at home and they're not in the office. So, but I also think that staff in turn have really, engaged and made sure that when they come to these calls and this time, that they actually feel that they have a structure to make sure that they are delivering to their job. So I think it's been, really enlightening for both employees and employers to step up their engagement to ensure they, are really communicating more. If anything, the pandemic had a positive impact and opened people's eyes to perhaps new ways of working. And so from my side, it's been good to see, especially at Yo.
Now, by having, I guess, employees work from home, some come into the office, what are we really losing from a communication standpoint? You mentioned some of the positives there, but there are certainly things that we do lose when people are not all working in the same place at once. Something's good, something's bad. What are some of those drawbacks?
Yeah, good question on that. And there definitely are some drawbacks. It's not all peaches and cream, as we would say. But what I've observed, from communication with 100% remote working, it can come across as being formal, factual, and we lose the opportunity to have those like spontaneous conversations that inspire really some of our best ideas and creativity, as well as the kind of small talk that helps build trust and ensure that human interaction with colleagues is there. So communication purely online is it can be too dimensional. We're in the little squares of Zoom or Teams or whatever your technology might be, and the conversation and the engagement can be two dimensional as well. There's body language that you don't get the opportunity to kind of assess fully your responses, and can be misleading. And tone of conversation can give mixed messages to conversation in person. And I just think that when you have an hour or however long with a member of staff, it almost feels like a bit of an interview, or a bit of a, you lose that kind of just little chit chat where, somebody lets their guard down, where they relax. And I think sometimes you can get more honesty from people in those kind of situations, and get to know people better, because it's not always work chat.
Yeah, have you found like ways where people can have those little informal conversations or brainstorms or little get-togethers that you could still do it remotely and kind of mimics that in-person feeling? I'm sure a lot of businesses have struggled with it. I'm
Yeah.
sure everybody has in some form. Have you seen any strategies that are working?
Yeah, so I think one of the things over the pandemic is we were constantly evolving and trying new things, and to try and foster that kind of environment, I've tried having like drop-in centers, like a drop-in, almost like I called it the drop-in clinic, or like, so basically, like, I just leave a Zoom meeting open, and I'd have it blocked out in my diary that I'd just say, hey, if you want to just come and drop in, you don't have to, but if you want to just come and say hi, have a chat, during work time, just for kind of like, maybe it's over a lunchtime where people can come take their lunch break together digitally, and just kind of like talk through whatever it might be, non-work related stuff, and just basically have a chat about, maybe throw a bit of banter around, so we've kind of like had it where it's a bit more optional, that people can come in, because one of the benefits of working remotely is you can manage your own time, and feeling obliged to come to a meeting to have small talk can again feel like formal. So I'd say, that's one thing we've done. But we also, we have regular events. We call it Fun Friday. We found this thing through lockdown that we wanted to kind of take the pressure off, because our job can be very high pressure, very sales orientated, very KPI orientated. So letting your foot off the gas on a Friday, we'd send a little care package out to all of our staff with a drink and some snacks and a few games, and it would get delivered on the Friday. And then they'd join the Zoom call, finish work early, and we'd do a few games, a few quizzes, do all these kind of like fun things. But I think that just having something where people don't feel like it's always about work, so you get that, a little bit of fun where it's not all about business, is worked well for us, I think.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me also in some ways of office hours for professors, where you can come in at a certain time frame and talk to your professor about, a project or something that you're struggling with. And it kind of goes the same way with bosses, where, hey, I'm going to have an open calendar. If you want to come in with an issue or something you want to talk through, just making it much more informal seems to be the key. We talked about, culture a little bit and making sure that everything's not informal. How important is it from just a cultural standpoint for team members to come together and talk during office hours, maybe about things that happen outside the office, whether it's TV shows, movies, sports, whatever it may be? How important is that conversation that's not about business to building a good culture at work?
So it's an interesting topic, that one, because it's a delicate subject based on the individual, because some people want to keep their own lives private and don't want to feel like they have to engage with an employer about what they get up to in their own personal life. But I think, and I think as an employer you should respect that. But I also think that showing an interest is important, and really can help build connections between team members that support that working relationship. So I think I personally think it's really important, but I think it's important not to impose, that kind of conversation with somebody who's not open to having that kind of chat, in the same way as it would be in the office, as it would be for working remotely. I think with the working remotely thing is you can almost be seen to be too engaging or too proactive on those kind of topics, which can feel overpowering. So it's a delicate thing. It's a balance. But I think, look, I mean, I'm a big sponsor of having a few minutes regularly throughout the day, bit of small talk, bit of banter, break up the working day. It really just helps relationships, collaboration, because it makes people realize that as a manager, you can be seen as the boss, the authority, but actually just having that moment where you're on the same level as everybody else means that you have more openness with your employees, and they have a kind of more willingness to come to you when they actually have a problem, and they want to talk to you about it. Again, it all just brings back that human element, being a person.
Yeah, let's take it maybe a step back. I mean, you mentioned collaboration and how important it is. Um, why, maybe just in general, why is collaboration important, and how you kind of build that trust
Mhm.
among your team? Working together obviously is proven to be pretty important to delivering better outcomes. But when we're all remote, it can be tougher to be as collaborative. So why is it so important to kind of have everybody working together in some way? And how do you find that we can make that happen in a remote environment?
Again, I think it's an important topic because without culture and collaboration, I think what makes us different from any other employer outside of our company benefits, right? So outside of our salaries, outside of our memberships or things we might have, or medical or whatever the benefits might be, a lot of the companies out there do similar things. They're competitors. They have similar products. They have similar services. So to me, culture really helps with identity of our brand. It supports engagement of our staff. It's why our employees would want to stay with the company longer term and build their career with us. I think that working in recruitment, I think a lot of time is spent understanding what people are looking for within their careers, and why they would be looking to leave a company. So I think when you have that kind of conversation, it makes you realize that it's not just about money, and it's not just about benefits. It's about culture. It's about people. It's about what is it that you're offering outside of it. Because if people enjoy working with you, they are going to want to stay with you because they like it here, because they want to be here. And that in turn then brings more team collaboration, creates bonds, peer-to-peer level, manager level, and employees can also then identify opportunities for progression, and employers can look for new leaders during collaboration activities. So, I think one of the things of being working remote and having an environment where collaboration is open in a digital world, you know, having that in a normal office, it's easy to kind of say, hey, these guys are my leaders, and it's easy for an employee to have an opportunity to stand out. And I think in a digital world, that's you have to work harder to be able to see those things, and employees have to also work harder to you know be seen as somebody who's going to be given an opportunity to progress.
When it comes to, I guess, those collaborations and building that culture, for people who have been with the company before COVID started to now and are still there, I would imagine a lot easier. I know from personal experience to be collaborative with people you knew before and know their working style and know what works best for them. But for new employees, what have you found is the best method to ensure they're properly onboarded, making sure they feel part of the team as much as they can right away, even if they're hybrid, remote, in person, whatever it may be?
Yeah, so I think really there's a continuity around what's important around this topic from being remote or being in person. I think the values remain the same, which I think is really underpinning that you're putting their needs first. The experience of onboarding somebody new really has an impact to their future within the organization. So just making sure that, when somebody starts, they are really welcomed into the team, to be shown how the whole team operates as a function. That they get time to spend, and be introduced to different departments, how everyone communicates together. Little things like just buddying somebody up on their first day during lunch, just to kind of have a chat over lunchtime, and still doing that in remote, saying, "Hey, what are you doing at lunch? Let's have a Zoom call just to have a chat." Personally, as well, I think that I really like to make sure I get feedback at the end of the first week, making sure they got all the tools, all the equipment, that they're feeling comfortable. It's just the little things that you forget when you've been in a company such a long time. Like, how do I book a holiday? What are the rules around starting times or dress code? Nobody wants to turn up to work suited and booted, and everyone else is in like jeans and t-shirt, right? But it's just getting those things right from day one. And, even on Zoom and stuff like that, just making sure like people's expectations are set, and communicated from day one. Just make sure that that experience is positive from the get go.
And Ben, finally, I'm going to ask you to take out your crystal ball and predict the future a little bit. What do you think team collaboration looks like in the future? As our workforce continues to expand and evolve quickly, more quickly than I'm sure many of us expected it to. How does effective communication look 5 years from now? What's different? What's the same?
Yeah, I think, crystal balls all aside, I think if you look back 2 years ago and said, hey, would you think that the world would have adapted to a hybrid working environment or a remote working environment? And I think that, it's been really interesting to see how it has evolved. But, I think we're already experiencing questions around limitations of how remote working can be. The world is is a smaller place than ever. It's opened up talent market for employers. It's also opened up the jobs market for candidates to get work, all over the country when perhaps they were limited to their location. So, I feel that trend is going to continue. And I think we're going to require more innovation, more technology to improve communication engagement for remote workers. Look, I've already been hearing about VR offices for environments for remote workers. Maybe that's the future. Maybe we're all going to have little VR headsets and we're going to be able to wave to our colleagues sat over in a virtual world to create that kind of environment. But who knows? That's just one idea that someone's had. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'd enjoy that. But yeah, we'll see, won't we?
Ben, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. Super fun to talk to you and learn your insights.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in to Yo's Back to Work podcast. To hear future episodes of this podcast, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen in. For Yo's Back to Work podcast, I'm Joe McIntyre. Talk to you next time.